Good evening, Gabriel-san. How are you?
Hello, Daniel. I'm doing just fine.
Cool. It's
So
funny because we were
let's,
just catching up on we were catching up on each other for a long time, so I know exactly how it's going. But I just said it for the recording.
yeah,
Anyways,
we
what were you
needed
saying?
an intro.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about Sirens of Titan.
Sirens of Titan. One thing here, just so that our names show. Gabriel and Monkey Butt. Phenomenal book, phenomenal author. Say 325-page read, but it goes quick if you're really very long time, many months actually. I think like 3 or 4 months. The second time I read it, it took me 3 days. Um, but that's because I was traveling and things. And that was about 3 years ago, last time I read it. However, I have been like reading a little bit with Gabriel here. Um, I'll kind of discuss my memory of the book, and then you'll feed in as appropriately because it's much fresher in your mind. And we'll talk about some of the important things that have kind of stuck with us, help us make decisions, right?
Yep. So
Three
first
things
is
we
the
like to talk
intro.
about here in book club. Summary. What was that?
So the first thing is the
First
intro
is the intro.
with Malachi Constant.
Malachi. Yeah, Malachi Constant, aka Malachi. Um, he's a rich boy, not arrogant or anything particularly, but he's described by the end cover, like the summary, as the richest, most depraved man on earth. Okay, depraved is an interesting word because that's like absent of something. So he's rich, full of everything, and then depraved, absent of all. So it's a bit of an oxymoron, which is funny in itself, I suppose, but it does describe rich people fairly well, or anybody, not necessarily rich people, but just because we have things doesn't mean we're devoid of what's important,
So
right?
so would it be safe to say that Malachi is like Vonnegut's perfect satire of the American dream or a rich person or some other kind of archetype?
Mm-hmm. Seems to be the case. From what I understand, it is a critique of our society, as is all of his books. There are strong, very dark critiques of society and what's wrong with them. And right off the back, we see that our consumeristic mentality, kind of like get more, be more happy type of deal, is a flaw, is false. Like just because you're rich doesn't mean you're satisfied. And the stories are endless of people who had it all. However, they were in a deep depression for whatever reason. Like for example, the terrible story of now I feel like an ass for forgetting his name, but he did the movie. I don't know. He did a lot of movies, like The World's Greatest Dad. That's probably one of his smaller movies. RV was another one of his movies. You remember RV?
Oh,
It's
Robin
like they go on a
Williams?
family trip. Robin Williams, yes. Terrible story, but like it's a pretty prime example. One of the friendliest, most outgoing, fulfilling person ever, and um, suicide. Anyways, Malachi. He goes and gets offered to go to space, with a beautiful lady or something of the such, and gets recruited for like a Martian army on Mars, and gets brainwashed with a bunch of other people, a couple thousand of other people, not millions, but a couple thousands of other people, and they're doing things during this time. He's kind of fighting the brainwashing thing, like he's learning more, but then as he gets in trouble, he gets his memory wiped. So then he has to read, he leaves himself clues because he realizes he's getting his memory wiped somehow. And then eventually he leaves Mars to go somewhere. I don't remember
He goes
exactly,
to
but
Mercury.
it's while that he goes to Mercury. That's right. And then there's like the little glob things, the little paper,
Yeah, the
uh,
harmoniums.
the harmon.
The only extraterrestrial life on Mercury are little harmoniums that they befriend in the caves.
Hmm, hmm. So these extraterrestrial friends, and it's a couple of them that go there. Malachi, but his name is different because he forgot his name. He became someone else. It's like Grunt.
No, his name was
Do you
Unk.
remember his name? Unk. Yep,
Yeah.
Unk.
So
UNK.
after Malachi's brainwashing, after he was in the Martian
Mm-hmm,
army, he became Unk, and then he fled to Mercury with his
mm-hmm.
friend Bose.
Bose. Tell me about Bose.
Bose was someone who pretended to be Unk's friend in the military, um, but he had a device that hurt him. But they eventually became friends on Mercury, and
Mm-hmm.
Bose kind of fell in love with the aliens, and then Unk figured out how to leave Mercury, so he did, and he left
Because they were
Bose.
stuck.
Yeah, they were
Yeah,
stuck
they
in a
were stuck.
cave, and then Unk slash Malachi left, and they Bose stayed on Mercury.
Mm-hmm,
And then after
mm-hmm.
that, they went back to Earth, where he met
And they
his.
found Earth was different now. What happened on Earth?
Yeah, so when Unk made it back to Earth, there was a new religion, and he met his family, and then him and his family
Mm-hmm,
went to Titan, the moon of Saturn, which is where
mm-hmm,
the main conclusion of the book happens, and they interact
mm-hmm,
with a robotic alien and go up to be old there.
mm-hmm. So this sounds extremely goofy and it's
Hold on, one more thing.
hard
We
to
mustn't
comprehend. Yeah, go for it.
we mustn't forget the main antagonist.
Hmm. I was gonna say like
The most
this
interesting
character,
character.
Numston Niall Rumford. What was it?
No, his name is Winston Niles
Houston
Rumford.
Magic. Winston Niles Rumford.
Yeah.
Yes, one of the most beautiful villains we've read about. I remember you mentioning it a couple times. How how perfect he's Mr. Winston Niles Rumford, which his name is always said in full, never in part for some odd reason, until the very end when conversing with a friendly alien who kind of dictates uh, lots of shit that goes on Earth, surprisingly. And spoiler alert, that's all this podcast is about. Um, It's a Tralfamadorian, this alien. Okay, if you've read any other of Kurt Vonnegut's books, you'll learn more about them. But essentially, it's an alien race that has existed for a long time. They had, more natural beings before them that created this robot called the Tralfamadorians, which are everlasting species, like robotic species, kind of like a transformer, as my brother described. But yeah, he uses the army to attack Earth while prophesizing that Earth was going to get attacked, but really he was just saying it was going to happen and then he made it happen himself. So it's fulfilling his own prophecy. And then he used the surprise on people to create a new religion, and he also prophesied uh, Unk coming down in a very specific manner, which he also planned to help persuade people into his religion even further. Um, and this was an interesting religion, and it's kind of how to flatline everything, equity at the highest. Okay, because you have equality and equity and like the big argument of what's better, etc. Like, oh, equality doesn't meet the different needs of others, and like equity is kind of too complex to ever establish or understand, blase blase. But he makes equity by uh, instead of raising up the lowers by lowering down the uppers. So if you're beautiful, you'd make yourself ugly, and if you were strong, you would make yourself weaker, and if you're like if you're weaker, you'd make yourself stronger to kind of everybody meet in the middle kind of deal. um, and people were for it because they saw the attack and things in the war. It became like a great thing. The Martian War, it was called. uh, but this was all for the purpose of kind of explaining how one guy who thinks he has absolute control over society and everything around him, but then you find out at the end something very surprising. And what is that, Gabe?
I think the intention is that fate isn't real. So how the main antagonist Winston portrays himself at the beginning of the book is very prophetic, like how you were explaining how he was prophetizing the future. And whilst reading it, you kind of believe him. You kind of think like, how can this guy see the future such as he
uh,
describes it? But it wasn't
but he keeps
actually
planning it.
it wasn't actually him peering into the future, it was him planning the future.
Hmm.
Like,
Manipulating the future, if you will.
yeah. I think in the beginning of the book when he first met Malachi, he didn't know all these things were gonna happen, but he knew how to make them happen. Um so then towards the end,
Hmm.
when he does create his new religion, that's when, like you said, you hit that realization that he planned everything with his own two hands and just put in the work to make his plans come to fruition, which is why he decided fate, basically.
But what's funny is he thinks he's all powerful, but surprise, he was actually being controlled by the Tralfamadorian, because the Tralfamadorian was stuck on the planet of Titan because his ship broke down, and he shared the technology with Winston to create that Martian army and travel in between the planets and stuff like that. But the Tralfamadorian was just using Winston and also a lot of previous human societies as tools to fix his ship so he could return home. So you think Winston is this all-powerful being, but then really it's the fucking Tralfamadorian who's been just using him in the end. And then he is like, ah, damn, I feel like a doofus. And he gets kind of depressed and the book ends. But yeah, that's pretty much the main plot. There are certain themes that I want to talk about that I really enjoyed, and that kind of helped me make my decisions in the future, like in now and stuff like that. And one is when he was in Mars, um, being the Martian army and his tools for self-discovery, for learning about who he truly was, learning about what the fuck was going on, instead of just being, like a military robot, which the way they describe it and how robotic everybody is, but the comparisons to like the actual army is extremely profound and symmetrical. Probably some type of dark critique or satire to our real army and military system. But not considering that, he has this device in his head, and you mentioned his friend following him and causing pain. Um, the main tool that he used to find himself, the main tool he used to do what he believed and found was, quote unquote, right, was that pain. He felt like when he felt that pain, something was right. He was going in the right direction. He was searching where he needed to be, where he was going where someone didn't want him to be. And that's actually a tool that I've used tremendously in my life. And thinking about it, I learned this lesson actually long before I read this book, but playing Call of Duty 2 or Call of Duty 1 on the PlayStation 2. Okay? It was you play the game, and every time me and my friend Tyler Patterson would get stuck or lost, if we were walking and there was no villains and there was nothing going on, we knew we were going the wrong way. But as soon as it was difficult and we are getting shot at, and we knew that was the right way to the end of the game. And I kind of took that not in any metaphorical way, but a tool for beating video games and succeeding at video games. But this book kind of helped me translate it into life. Like in cross country, I knew I was doing the best in cross country when like I would run, and it was the hardest it could be. Like, if I felt it more difficult, I knew I was doing it right. You know what I mean? And like in school and things like that, it if I was taking classes and it was too easy, stuff pulled me into the right direction. You know, so I
Yeah,
really liked that statement of Unk.
yeah, that's called surpassing your limits.
Surpassing your limits. What do you know about that? Where did
Um,
that phrase come from?
I mean, it's just
You just made
no,
it up?
it's I didn't just make it up. Like it's a phrase that people say in, like movies and books and stuff, but it's essentially what you were
Mm-hmm.
just talking about. Like when you are doing something that you find to be beneficial and you feel that pain that's going on, like
Mm-hmm.
that's your body reaching its limit, but the only way to get better at what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing is to break that limit and keep going.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Unk's pain was from being more knowledgeable and like um, empathetic towards other people, and
Mm-hmm.
that was like his goal because he wanted to find his family because he had a spouse and a
Oh.
child on Mars,
Mm-hmm.
and I think he was assimilating or not assimilating, associating the pain he would get from his officers from his remote
Mm-hmm.
radio thing is him trying to learn how to be like a normal person
And not
and a
just a
father.
robot.
Yeah, and a father rather than being a soldier.
Yep. Talk to me a little more about Chronos.
Chrono, yeah, the sun. So,
Mm-hmm.
so it's not the story doesn't talk that much about him, but from my understanding,
He's a badass. I
um,
don't know. He's just funny.
yeah, Chrono's pretty weird. He's a weirdo, but that's Malachi slash Unk's son, and he
Mm-hmm.
was conceived in a spaceship on the way to Mars. So how um, Malachi and his spouse first met was in the main antagonist's mansion, Winston Now's Roomford's mansion, because that was his wife at the time. And he prophesied they would go to space and all these things that we've already discussed. And essentially, some Martian like agents kidnap Malachi and the wife B. And in the spaceship, Malachi forces himself upon her, and that's where she conceives Chrono. And then they get their memory wiped and brainwashed on Mars for the army, and that's where their son grows up. And they only
Mm-hmm.
play baseball. That's all the only thing the kids do there. They no, not baseball. It was German bat ball, I think, something like that. But Chrono, yeah,
So some odd
Chrono
variant
was
of
the best
baseball.
bat ball player on Mars. Um,
Oh, I forgot about that.
and
Yeah,
he had a
that's
little
right.
metal thing that made him invincible, like a little metal piece.
Mhm.
That was his good luck charm. Yeah,
Like a
it
lucky
made him
charm.
the best at everything.
Mhm.
And while on Mars, his mother was a teacher and taught people how to basically hold their breath in space and live like that. But
Yeah.
I don't really understand Chrono. Like, he's always
Control.
discussed as a delinquent,
Mhm.
but I feel like he doesn't interact enough with his father to like draw any conclusions about him. At least that's how I feel about him.
Mhm. He's definitely a far side character. Just like the there's this child that never gets talked about that he
Like, as
didn't
far
even
as I
know
know,
until later. Like,
yeah, so I was actually gonna get to that. His only real big story moment is in the last like chapter of the book where him and his family
mhm.
on Titan and the Chalfamodorian robot tells him that his good luck piece is the part that he needs for his spaceship to go home. And that's kind of it. Like he literally just
Yeah.
leaves the story after that. And that was his only big like
Uh-huh.
character interaction slash realization thing. Um so
But
yeah, I'm
really,
not
if you
sure
think about it, it's a small part of the book, but it's the main part of the book. Everything in the entire book happens for that moment.
because the Chalfamodorian
Everything,
wanted the part. He got it.
yeah. Like the Tralfamadorian wanted that part, so he created, that entire scheme with Winston, created a new religion, so that he would make this piece, play with this piece, find this piece, whatever, and then
Hmm.
it be brought to him.
I can't recollect how Chrono finds his good luck piece.
I'll look it up on the interwebs. We'll see
Don't you have the
what's
book,
up.
don't you?
Yeah, I got the book, but like, does the book even say it? What page would I even look for? It
I don't
might be.
remember.
So here, and Noel Constant had an investment program. So that's not on Mars yet. Captain Arnold Buck came into the barrack. Yep, on Mars. Bose. A lot of talk about Bose. Unk. Are you looking it up online?
Yeah. It's so ambiguous. It just says he found it somewhere.
You found it somewhere.
Yeah. I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah, so some might call it a plot hole. Um, because why couldn't the fucking Tralfamadorian just go pick it up from wherever it was? But how would the Tralfamadorian know that all of this would happen to such a high degree? Um, Maybe that just has to do with the chronosynclastic infundibulum. That's what that was called? Hold on. Let me read that part of the book. This is actually a beautiful line, I think in the first page or so.
Wait.
It's like there's what's that? You remember where it talks about there's this place where uh so just imagine your daddy is the smartest dad in the world. Another planet with another kid with another dad who is also the smartest guy in the world. And if you asked him anything, he'd have an answer for it. But if these two daddies were to meet, like they would get into an argument and never agree with each other. Do you remember reading that at all? Here, look, I found it.
Um, I don't think so.
I'll read it out loud. The chronosynclastic infundibula. Okay, so this is a description by the Child's Cyclopedia of Wonders and Things to Do. Okay, so just imagine that your daddy is the smartest man who ever lived, everything there is to find out, and he is exactly right about everything, and he can prove he is right about everything. Now imagine another little child on some nice world a million light years away, and that child's daddy is the smartest man who ever lived on that nice world so far away. He is just as smart and just as right as your daddy is. Both daddies are smart, and both daddies are right. Only, if they ever met each other, they would get into terrible arguments because they wouldn't agree on anything. Now you can say that your daddy is right and the other little child's daddy is wrong, but the universe is an awfully big place. There is room enough for an awful lot of people to be right about things and still not agree. The reason both daddies can be right and still get into terrible fights is because there are so many different ways of being right. There are places in the universe, though, where each daddy could finally catch on to what the other daddy was talking about. These places are where all the different kinds of truths fit together as nicely as the parts in your daddy's solar watch. We call these places chronosynclastic infundibula. The solar system seems to be full of chronosynclastic infundibula. There is one great big one we are sure of that likes to stay between Earth and Mars. We know about that one because an Earthman and his Earth dog ran away. You might think it would be nice to go to a chronosynclastic infundibulum and see all the different ways to be absolutely right, but it is a very dangerous thing to do. The poor man and his poor dog are scattered far and wide, not just through space, but through time too. Chrono means time, synclastic means curved toward the same side in all directions, like the skin of an orange. Infundibulum is what the ancient Romans like Julius Caesar and Nero called a funnel. If you don't know what a funnel is, get mommy to show you one. And that's it. So it's extremely confusing, but this man and the dog is Winston and his dog.
Yeah, we didn't
They go
mention the
He-Man.
dog.
Oh yeah, this book can be talked about for a long time, and honestly, it makes no sense unless you read all of it, because every page is pretty important for the development of the next. Honestly, uh, which is beautiful. Honestly, you can't be a truly great writer unless every word matters. You know what I mean? Like I heard that description for George Orwell and his writing for 1984. You couldn't make it smaller. You know what I mean? Like it is impossible to remove any idea, any word, any sentence, any paragraph. Like everything has its place, and I think this book does that well. You know what I mean? Like if if it's something that I don't understand, I feel like I just need to read it again, and it'll add up
Yeah, I
very
agree.
well. I know that because
There's a lot of
second time I read it, it was a whole.
there's a lot of
What was
foreshadow.
that?
There's a lot of foreshadowing in the beginning.
A lot of foreshadowing. You know, it's just a mess of information at the beginning.
It doesn't
You
make
know what I mean?
sense,
But
but
really,
that's intentional because it feels like you're revealing it as you progress with the pages.
I remember when you were reading it, you were like, "What is this? What is that? Like, what's going on?" And then at the end, you're just like, "Oh,
It doesn't explain everything to you. Like you gotta piece it together and then
uh-huh,
you find out why. Which I liked it. It
exactly."
was
Yeah, the first,
reading more like reading
yeah,
a mysterious adventure rather than like a normal sci-fi.
that's a great way to describe it.
Yeah, it's
A
a mysterious adventure
mysterious adventure.
instead of like a normal sci-fi hero story.
hmm Cool. Well, anything else you want to say about the book?
Um, I'm thinking.
Excuse me.
I kind of want to talk about Titan more in the actual title of the book. I feel like it'd be pretty cool if we
Oh
talked about the
yeah,
title because
yeah.
titles are important.
It's mysterious. Throughout the whole book, you're like, why is it called the Sirens of Titan? What are sirens? What is Titan? Well, you learn quickly that Titan is a moon of Saturn, right? But what are the sirens?
So, when Malachi first met Winston, he showed him like a Polaroid of
Hmm.
the sirens, but it was very fast and like not very talked about much. But it was three different colored women. And then at the
Hmm.
very end of the book, when Malachi moves to Titan with his family and they're pretty much stranded there all alone, um, they were punished to be there by Winston, I think, because he formulated his whole religion to be against Malachi's way of life and being luckily rich. But anyways, on
Hmm.
Titan, the child from Enduring Robot would carve statues out of peat to pass the time because he was there for so many hundreds of
Hmm.
thousands of years. And there were three statues of women, of human women, that were in the bottom of Winston's pool on his crib in Titan, and those were the sirens. It was just three random statues in a pool. And like
Yep.
I guess they were called sirens because they're beautiful women in water, like how mythical sirens are. But I find it just so
Hmm.
interesting how the like symbolic title of the book is based off of three random statues in a pool that a robot made all on his lonesome because he was bored. Um,
Hmm.
because they're really only mentioned twice throughout the book. So I wonder why
Hmm.
Kurt Vonnegut made it the title. Because as far as I can tell, they're not related to the plot, so there must be a symbol for something that is in the plot.
Yeah, I forgot what I thought first. I remember I had something, but I'm gonna create like what's coming to mind now as the meaning of these sirens and what they symbolize potentially. And the siren is like the underwater figures, statues. You know what I mean? Um, and it might just be that we're all just drowning in time. Like time is this idea that kind of encages us, hoping for something different in the future as opposed to really just enjoying the now. Um, and I'm only really saying this because this is an idea I've been enjoying a lot lately. But the sirens are these statues frozen in time, encapsulated by the safety of the water, stoned like as hard as anything, and they just be, man. And everybody's thinking that they're doing something, and they're looking forward to changing the future. They're looking forward to being better, being worse, etc., or whatever their ambitions may be, but not really appreciating the now. Like, does it matter if some alien on Siren is controlling our every move indirectly, just so that they can get a piece to get back to their home planet? Like, sure, it's interesting to know, and it's fun to combat. You know what I mean? But for the most part, like until we're able to get clues on those things, we might as well just enjoy space as it is without really thinking about time, future, and past, just the now.
Okay, I think that's a good point. I think that makes sense if you kind of think about the title literally. Like, if, you know,
Hmm.
let's just pretend that these statues were actual sirens, they would be singing a song trying to lure a sailor over to Titan to
Hmm.
their death. And Malachi
Mhm.
sees this photo of the Sirens at the very beginning of the story. And he thinks, the cutie pies. So maybe he was drawn into them
Mhm.
since the start of the book, and everything
Well, wasn't
that happens
that
during the
how they
book.
got him to Mars? Like he showed the picture. Uh-huh.
Well, I think that
Keep going.
like
Keep going.
everything that happened throughout the book was him indirectly like making his way towards Titan to where the Sirens were, where he was ultimately sent to Titan to
Hmm.
die.
Hmm.
So I think the
Yeah.
yeah,
So even
so I
from the
think
beginning,
that the title is perhaps insinuating that like time
where he
yeah,
goes to
if
die.
there's sirens on Titan that means like danger or death.
Hmm. Cool. Okay. Last thing I want to talk about is how Chronos ended.
Oh, you
Chrono.
mean the Birdman? Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
basically
Chrono just got tired of.
yeah, so Titan's
He just got tired of human life. That's funny. We just keep talking over each other. Perfectly
sorry.
timing. We wait for each other to talk, but then it's like, it's okay. Um, I want to say it because it's pretty funny. But he gets tired of wearing people clothes, and he starts cawing and cooing like the birds, and becomes a birdman and lives in the wild.
In Titan.
And
They're
that's
big
it.
space birds.
In Titan, yeah, with space birds. Because at first he tried, eating the Earthling food, and he was doing it for a little while. From the house of Winston or whatever that they made for him, them, I should say. But he said, "Fuck it, I'm gonna be a birdman," and he did.
Yeah, no, he's a real king.
Yep. But that's that.
Yeah. It's a
This
really
book
good
was
book.
written in 1959. Yeah,
I'll read it again someday.
really good book. Cool. Alrighty. Catch you later, broski. Good
Yep.
talking
Good
to you.
night, sir.